They say the gods never sleep. But what if I told you there was a time they almost lost their minds? That was how old Papa Odika would begin every night by the fire, his voice trembling like a rustling palm frond. And if you leaned close enough, you'd see the fire in his eyes, because this tale was not one for the faint-hearted. Long, long ago, in the ancient land of Umuikem, the earth trembled not from thunder, but from the arrogance of men. At the heart of Umuikem was a great shrine, Onunso, guarded by the high priest Dikeocha, whose white hair danced like smoke and whose words carried the weight of 1,000 spirits. The gods were revered, feared, and obeyed, until one foolish king challenged their wisdom. His name was Obiajulu, a young ruler full of ambition and questions. "Why must we always do as the gods say?" he thundered one morning in the palace court, his red chieftain beads clinking against his bare chest. "If the gods are so wise, let them prove it." His words scattered like seeds on dry soil, each one dangerous, each one tempting fate. The elders warned him, the priests begged him, but Obiajulu laughed. "Are the gods afraid of truth?" he asked as he paced through the village square. "If they are truly wise, then let them answer a riddle that even men cannot solve." Gasps filled the air like smoke. Women held their babies tighter. Men shook their heads. And so it was that Obiajulu, the king of Umuikem, carved 3 impossible riddles into the sacred stone of Omambala, a stone only the gods could touch, without bursting into flames. He offered them a challenge and left the stone at the foot of the great shrine, then declared, "If by the new moon the gods do not answer, I shall take their shrine, burn it, and declare myself wiser than they." Thunder rumbled in the distance, but no rain came. The villagers watched, terrified, as the moon waxed and waned. Chickens refused to lay eggs. The rivers whispered warnings. Children woke crying, naming things they had never seen. Then came the night of the new moon. As the sky turned dark, a strange fog crawled into the land. Trees bent low as if in mourning. The earth fell silent. Suddenly, a blinding light struck the stone of Omambala. The people gathered at the shrine, their knees trembling, as 3 beings appeared from the mist, cloaked in feathers, shadows, and flame. They were not gods as men imagined. No, they were more terrifying, because they looked like men, and yet not. They spoke in voices that echoed like drums from the deep. Who dares test the minds that shaped the world? King Obiajulu stepped forward, pride still burning in his chest. "I do," he said, even as his voice cracked. The first god, Ika, touched the stone and read the first riddle aloud. "What can speak without a tongue, move without feet, and see without eyes, but dies when silence falls?" the villagers whispered, wide-eyed. It was a riddle of madness. No one had ever heard such a thing. Obiajulu folded his arms, smiling smugly. "Even I do not know the answer," he said. "Let's see your wisdom." But the god only smiled and pointed to the wind. The wind speaks, moves, sees, but when silence comes, it is no more. A hush fell over the crowd. The second god, Ori, stepped forward and read the second riddle. "What grows without roots, sleeps without a bed, and dies every morning only to live again at night?" The king frowned, uncertain now. But the god looked skyward and answered, "The moon." A murmur ran through the people. Even the birds stopped their songs. Finally, the third god, Afo, approached. His cloak burned with blue fire. He read the final riddle. "What is heavier than a mountain but carried by every heart, deeper than the ocean but seen in a single tear?" Obiajulu staggered. He had crafted this riddle from his deepest pain. He whispered, "Even I don't know the answer to that one." The god's eyes softened. He stepped close to Obiajulu and placed a hand on his chest. "Grief," he said. And with that, the flames of Obiajulu's pride were snuffed out. The gods vanished into the mist, leaving only the glowing stone behind. And on it, written in fire, were the words, "The gods are wise, not because they know all answers, but because they understand all hearts." From that day on, Obiajulu rebuilt the shrine with his own hands, stone by stone, and every evening he knelt before it, not in fear, but in understanding. But peace, like palm wine left in the sun, does not last forever. Though Obiajulu humbled himself before the gods, not everyone in Umuikem followed his path. Deep in the shadows of the forest, in a hidden grove near the cursed hills of Ugwunta, lived a feared Dibia named Njoku Emba, a man of no tribe, no kin, and no mercy. He had watched the gods answer the king's riddles, and it had ignited in him a hunger, not for wisdom, but for power. Njoku Emba believed that if the gods could think like men, they could also fall like men. One midnight, under a sky where no star dared to shine, Njoku Emba entered the shrine of Onunso. His eyes burned with ambition, and in his hand he held a black feather taken from the crow that guarded the realm of the dead. He smeared his body with the blood of a python, and with a voice as cold as the grave, he spoke, "O wise ones, I do not come to kneel, I come to summon you." The ground split, the wind screamed, the shrine trembled as if the gods themselves had gasped, but nothing came. Njoku Emba smiled. He turned to the sacred stone of Omambala and placed upon it a new riddle, a curse wrapped in question. What cannot die, yet lives in fear? What cannot be seen, yet rules all eyes? What do even gods dread when men no longer believe? He turned and vanished into the night, leaving the cursed riddle pulsing on the stone like a living wound. By dawn, the sun refused to rise. Cocks crowed in confusion. Women found their pots filled with sand instead of water. A child named Ikenna opened his mouth to speak, and a swarm of bees flew out instead of words. Panic gripped Umuikem. They ran to King Obiajulu, but he was silent, his face pale as yam skin. He knew what was happening. The gods had been challenged again, but this time, the riddle was not a test. It was a trap. Priest Dikeocha gathered the elders beneath the great Iroko tree. "The gods will not answer this time," he said grimly, "because the riddle is poisoned. It was not made with wisdom, but with mockery." The gods had grown quiet, but not absent. That night, the skies cracked open again, but this time no gods came in glory. Instead, a voice, ancient and weary, whispered across the village. Wisdom is not knowing every riddle. It is knowing when to remain silent. Then something terrifying happened. The shrine of Onuenso sank into the earth, not destroyed, not burned, but hidden, as if the gods had withdrawn from the world. Obiajulu fell to his knees. "Have we offended them again?" But the priest shook his head. "No," he whispered. "They are waiting for us to remember." And then came the dream. Every man, woman, and child in Umuikem, yes, even Njoku Emba in his cursed hut, dreamt the same dream. A giant tree with roots that touched the bones of ancestors, a crown floating in a river of blood, and a woman, cloaked in white, holding a newborn baby with no face. She spoke only 3 words: "Find the answer." And so the quest began, not by war or sacrifice, but by listening. Young Ikenna, the boy who once spoke bees, wandered into the hills and found an ancient drum buried in the earth. When he beat it, it didn't sing, it wept. Obiajulu left his palace and went into the huts of the poor, asking mothers what they feared most. Priest Dikeocha sat beneath the Iroko tree, fasting for 7 days, until the spirits of the old ones whispered in the rustling leaves. And far away, in Ugwunta, Njoku Emba began to wither. For every lie he told to gain power, a part of his body turned to salt. The answer was coming, but not from thunder, not from fire. It was coming from truth. 3 moons passed. Still, the gods remained silent. In Umuikem, the crops had begun to rot in the ground. Children laughed less. Drums were silent. The once booming voice of King Obiajalu had become a whisper. But it was young Ikenna, the boy who once spoke bees, who finally saw what others missed. One early morning, Ikenna climbed the sacred hills of Ugwu Okechi, barefoot and alone. He had followed the dream, the faceless baby, the weeping drum, the river of blood. At the top of the hill, he found a broken mirror half buried in the soil. It was no ordinary mirror. When he looked into it, he didn't see himself. He saw Njoku Imba. Sitting in his hut, surrounded by dying birds, muttering to himself, "Why won't they answer me? I am the clever one. I am the wise one." Ikenna's heart pounded. The riddle was not for the gods. It was a mirror. A trap set not for them, but for us. He returned to the village and called for a gathering. Though he was only a boy, the people came, because hope is sometimes found in small hands. Ikenna stood upon the very spot where the shrine had once been and shouted, "The gods are not silent. They are waiting for us to hear our own echoes." Gasps, confusion, murmurs. "I saw it," he continued, voice trembling. "The riddle Njoku Mba wrote was not to test the gods' wisdom. It was to mock it. He asked what even the gods fear. But the truth is, the gods do not fear death. They fear being made unnecessary." The old priest Dikeocha stepped forward, tears in his eyes. Yes, yes, that is why they withdrew, not in anger but in grief. Obiajulu clenched his staff, his voice returning like a rising storm. "Then let us show them we remember, not with sacrifices, but with truth." The people gathered. They sang old songs, not of pleading, but of praise. They told stories. They hugged. They forgave. They looked into each other's faces and saw the divine. That night, the sky lit up, not with fire, but with stars brighter than any had ever seen. The stone of Omambala rose from the earth once more, glowing softly, and on it, a final message. Wisdom is not in the riddle, but in the listening heart. Suddenly, the child from the dream, the faceless one, appeared at the edge of the village. But now, the child had a face. It was Ikenna's. The villagers fell to their knees. Dikeocha whispered, "The gods have spoken through him, because only a child could see without pride." The gods did not return in thunder nor lightning. They returned in understanding, in healing, in peace. And Njoku Mba, he vanished that very night, swallowed by a whirlwind of ash and silence. Some say he became a spirit that wanders with no voice. Others say the gods forgave him too, but only after he learned humility in the world of shadows. From that day, the people of Umuikem knew the gods are not wise because they answer every question. They are wise because they know when to speak and when to let men learn. And that, my child, is why when you sit by the fire and the wind brushes your cheek, you must listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. Because the gods still whisper, only the wise can hear them. The sun rose over Umuikem like it had never risen before, bold, golden, and full of promise. Laughter returned to the village. The rivers flowed with songs. Children played under the trees without fear. And each morning, the people gathered around the sacred stone of Omambala, not to beg, but to remember. Ikenna became a symbol, not of power, but of clarity. He grew, not into a king, but into a storyteller, just like the one you're hearing now. And every time someone asked, "Why are the gods so wise?" he would smile gently and say, "Because they knew that the greatest lesson was already inside us." So now, the riddle is no longer a weapon. It is a whisper passed from lips to lips, from hearts to hearts. What do even gods fear? And the answer? That we forget who we truly are. And now, my friend, the story has found you. If this tale touched your heart, If it made you think, feel, or simply remember, then do one small thing to keep its spirit alive, like this video, so the fire of these stories never dies. Subscribe to the channel and join the circle of truth seekers and wisdom lovers. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who may have forgotten that they too carry the spark of the gods. And most importantly, leave a comment below. What did you learn from this story? What riddle are you still trying to answer? Let your voice become part of the tale. Let your heart become a shrine. And remember, the gods are still listening. Until the next fire, stay wise.